Well, today is Sunday, April the 25th. I hope that you are planning to join us for our services today at Hillsdale Baptist Church. Our Sunday school hour is at 9:15, and our broadcast begins at 9:30. Our Sunday morning service is at 10:30, and I am looking forward to continuing my study in the book of 2 Timothy. But on to today's devotional. Well, I've titled this devotional Women's Rights and the Changing of the Guard. It's a fascinating point of Scripture, Numbers 26 and 27, and I want to give you a little bit of the background. Now, the gross adultery and idolatry recorded in Numbers 25 had provoked God to send a plague that occasioned the deaths of 24,000 Israelites. Well, once the plague was passed, the Lord commanded Moses to take a final census before crossing over the Jordan River. Now, this census was for young men from 20 years old and upward through their father's house. Now, you might ask the question, why only the men? Well, the answer is found in verse 2 of Numbers 26. All that are able to go to war in Israel, that is, to cross over into the promised land and war for the possession of that land. Now, Numbers 26 then gives us the final census before the promised land. A census of the 12 tribes was first recorded in Numbers 1 and 4. That was after Israel left Egypt and had crossed into the what we would call probably today the Arabian Peninsula. Well, there is an interesting comparison of the census that covers the 40 years. For instance, the first census totaled 603,500 men. The second census, the one now that we find in Numbers 26, was 601,730 men. And so there was a decline in fighting men. But you have to remember, there have followed several judgments as a result of the spirit of rebellion and sin that was found in Israel. Well, why was this census important? Well, the answer for that is this. It was the basis of assigning lands, the territories within the promised land, to each of the individual tribes. And in addition to that, the latter part of Numbers 26 also reminds us that the tribe of Levi was the priestly tribe chosen by the Lord to serve him. Therefore, that land, that tribe did not have an inheritance in Canaan. Now, Numbers 26 finally concludes with a sobering reminder of God's judgment upon Israel. The prior generation had all perished in the wilderness. However, there were two men that were the exception, and that was Caleb and Joshua. God remembered their faithfulness. God spared their life. They would be the two men out of all those that had left Egypt from 20 years old and upward that would cross into the promised land. Now, that brings us to Numbers 27. Numbers 27 is a fascinating moment within the Scriptures, but it also proves this, that the Lord's judgments were just in the matter of women's rights. Now, that might surprise you. But Numbers 27, verses 1 through 11, gives us a wonderful case study of the rights of women and reveals the inequitable laws that women protest today were never God's way, but man's. If men would follow the ethics of the Scripture, they would realize the ways of the Lord are wise, benevolent, and compassionate. Now let's look at the moment, the setting, the event. 5 daughters of one man of the tribe of Manasseh come to Moses and Eleazar, the high priest, in Numbers 27, 1 and 2. Their father had died with no son, leaving no male heir. Well, the daughters come to Moses and they ask the question about their father's right of inheritance in the promised land. According to the law, a man's inheritance was to pass to his son. However, the question these daughters had was, without a son, what was to become of a father's inheritance or his possessions. Well, the daughters reasoned this, Numbers 27 and verse 4. Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family, because he hath no son? While arguing they and their father had been slighted, the women petitioned, Numbers 27 and verse 4, Give unto us therefore a possession among the brethren of our father. Well, rather than make a hasty, ill-advised decision or trust men's opinions, Moses withdrew, and we read in Numbers 27 and verse 5 that he brought the cause or the case of the daughters before the Lord. Well, the Lord affirmed the sister's assertion and answered Moses, Thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, Listen, if a man die and have no son, then ye shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughter. What a wonderful insight into the compassion of a holy God. Do you realize that all around the world this matter of inheritance has always gone to the men, always gone to the son, and yet here the Lord himself defined and designated that if there's not a son who is the heir, then the inheritance shall pass to the daughters. Now, why was this being done? It was being done because it was important that the lands that were in the promised land would stay within the tribes themselves. Well, Numbers 27, 12 through 23 brings us to what I am going to call the end of an era. The Lord commanded Moses, Get thee up into this mount of Abiram, and see the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. And when thou hast seen it, thou shalt be gathered, you will die, thou shalt be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron thy brother was gathered. Well, Moses was reminded that he would not enter the land of promise, and he accepted the consequence of his sin with grace. But like a true shepherd leader, Moses requested the Lord, set a man over the congregation. You see, Moses desired to ensure his successor would be a man of God's choosing and a man with the shepherd's heart. Well, God chose Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, that is the Spirit of God. Leaving no uncertainty that Joshua was God's choice, the Lord directed Moses to confirm him before all the congregation. Well, Moses obeyed the Lord, and he took Joshua, laid his hands upon the man, gave him a charge as the Lord commanded. Now, I have a closing thought for you. Although he was the greatest of men to ever live, Moses did inevitably go the way of all flesh and was gathered unto his people. Miriam was dead. Aaron was dead. And because Moses had sinned before all the people, he would die without crossing into the promised land. The author of Hebrews writes, And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. Psalm 90 and verse 12. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. This is Sunday. Go to church. If you don't have a church, join us online. But make sure that you are pursuing the Lord and his wisdom. The Lord bless you today. He is a God who is loving, benevolent, and compassionate. Well before women's rights, God was the God who sought that all would be treated with justice and fairness. What a wonderful God we serve. God bless. Have a great day. Bye-bye.